Uno de los mayores expertos a nivel internacional, lo decía Miriam al principio, y ya lo tenemos en pantalla, es el profesor de Harvard, Cass Sunstein, que ha sido también asesor de los presidentes norteamericanos Obama y Biden, con quien Miriam ha tenido el placer de hablar, de dialogar esta semana. Le hubiera encantado estar presente hoy aquí, nos lo dijo expresamente, pero está en Ítaca y son las 5 de la mañana allí, así es que le hemos dado permiso para hacerlo grabada la entrevista. Si os parece, la escuchamos.
We are here with Cass Sunstein, who is the leading authority on behavioral science and its application to regulation. He is the co-author of NUTS, and we are really lucky that he has agreed to be interviewed today from the United States. His remarkable work has proven something that we are really interested in, which is that if you eliminate friction, what he calls sludge, it is much easier to have access both to support and also to opportunities. Welcome, Cass, and we want to interview you in the context, as you know, of a project that you have helped with, which is the project Imagina, where we have tried to put together two things: behavioral science and also a process of co-creation of solutions based on behavioral science with young people. Imagina was born because we started by listening to young people, and they told us that they didn't want only resources, they wanted opportunities, and they wanted the opportunities as easily accessible as possible. We engaged into a phase one, which was the analysis of the barriers that they were encountering in two areas: how to foster entrepreneurship and also how to have more access to practical experience, to internship. And we look at the barriers, both the visible ones, so the complex procedures, the scatter information, etc., and also the invisible ones, the fear of failure, the not having a risk or an education in a risk culture. And then we moved with them into what are the solutions? Can you help us to define the solutions? And we have put together concrete solutions for targeting those barriers. But one of the most interesting things that we have found in the process is that simply by participating in those discussions, young people were telling us that they have seen their self-confidence increase and that they have a feeling of yes, we can do this. So having all this background in mind, can you tell us in a very simple manner, what is behavioral science and what are the benefits of looking at real behavior of real people when you are defining policy?
Thank you for that. It's a real honor to talk to you and to those of you who are willing to listen. And it's completely inspiring to see what you've done with young people and with getting behavioral science in general discussion. So behavioral science is really the science of human behavior. We've learned more from all over the world in the last 50 years than we ever knew before. We know, for example, that people really care about the short term. Today really matters. The long term is a foreign country and people aren't sure they're ever going to visit. We know that people have limited attention, that the number of things that are important to them is a lot higher than the number of things that they can attend to. We know that people, and this is a good thing, tend to be unrealistically optimistic on average. That's what our species is, and that's desirable. If you're really scared all the time, or if you're pessimistic, probably things won't go so well, but it can lead people to be unrealistic about situations. We also know from behavioral science that if there are barriers to entrepreneurship, to innovation, to taking advantage of opportunities, to doing things in the private sector that can create economic growth, or things in the public sector that can give people maybe a little hand up, maybe some help of one or another kind, we know those barriers have an outsized effect on what people do. People tend to get discouraged. They sometimes despair. they sometimes think to themselves, well, I can't do it, maybe someone can, which means that the behavioral work on how the human mind works gives us an opportunity to see what sorts of complexity can really damage societies and what kinds of simplification can give people a big spur and maybe create a world of innovative development.
And picking up from that, because you talk about the simplicity, what we have seen in the process of working with young people is that sometimes simply making resources visible already has a very big effect. To what extent do you think that sometimes it's more about highlighting resources that the state already has and simplifying them rather than having to go through the whole process of creating new ones?
That's a great point. So sometimes the most effective policy changes are seemingly really small. So if you have something that's available and people can find out about it, but they don't know about it, then it's as if it's not available because they don't know what it is. They don't know what to do about it. It's not on their view screen. So here's an English word with your indulgence that is a magic word, salience. It's not the most beautiful word in the English language, but if something is salient to people, then it can really affect what they do and they can take advantage of it. If it's not salient, it might not have an effect at all. And we've seen that all over Europe and North America, where increasing the salience of something, it might be a risk, for example, from cigarette smoking, or it might be an opportunity, let's say a training program or an opportunity to engage in some new work. The salience of the good and salience of the bad can change people's lives.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about small things because small steps. No, that is very much something that we have found in this process of looking at solutions with Imagina. No, that when people start small, it is much easier to take the very first steps. So we have been looking at micro internships, for example, or having just a practice buddy. How does that relate to the theory of behavioral science? And do you think that this is something that applies also to other public services? Is this something, for example, that could be applied to housing or to public health?
Completely. So take a look, if you would, if some aspect of your own life, for everyone who's engaged in this conversation, probably you can identify one thing that was small that made everything better. It might be that you met someone who gave you an opportunity. It might be someone who gave you an inspiration. It might be a day, just a day where you went somewhere and it made you see things a little bit differently. So this is true for individual life for young people all over the world. If there's some small intervention that shows here's something that you can try, it might be something that will make the next year very different and much better for them, or it might be something that won't be what they choose, but it will make them think there's something kind of like it that could change my life, and I'll try that, or at least trying things is a very good thing. So small interventions, they can be policy initiatives like giving people automatic enrollment in something rather than making them fill out a form. Automatic enrollment can often have a massive effect on people's participation rates, or saying to people, just send them a text message and saying on Saturday, if you want to try this, go for it. And reminders and text messages are often a very effective nudge, and they can have a bigger impact sometimes than the expenditure of a lot of money.
Yeah. That's really interesting and a very good general advice whenever we are making policy. We have started with something relatively small, as you know. This is civil society getting organized and trying to prove the value of this methodology to make policy. And we have started with two relatively small pilot projects. In your experience, what do you really need to make, what scale do some of those projects need to have credibility, and what do we need to add to that in order to be able to get to the goal of what we want, which is to get this routinely applied when making public policy by any administration in Spain?
I'll give you two government examples, if I may. One, in the United States government, we had a big problem with people who are poor eligible for free school meals, but they don't sign up. And that means that many hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of poor children don't get meals to which they're entitled. So we tried something where if we know they're eligible, they don't have to sign up. It's called direct certification. They're just in, and if they want the free school meals, they've got them. And we piloted that on a small scale, and it completely worked. And then it went national. So direct certification became a national program. Here's another idea that affects many people in Europe and North America, which is how hard is it to go through security to fly? And we created a program. There are these all over Europe as well. Ours is called TSA Pre, or Global Entry. TSA Pre is the domestic, Global Entry is the international. And we said, if you apply for a program and we find out that you're not a terrorist, it's going to be easier for you. And we piloted that to make sure it was working. It didn't create any security problems. It started out very small. And the result was it's all over our country now, and it's providing massive benefits in terms of ease of travel to people. And these are two things that were piloted on a very small scale, and many interventions that involve healthcare. Our system is very, very far from perfect. But many of the interventions that involved text messages to people, or interventions to get people to try to take their medicine if they need them. We have 125,000 people approximately dying every year because they don't take their medicine. So we've piloted various things, including a pillbox, which makes it very clear, this is for Monday morning, this is for Wednesday night. And then if you're 85 years old and keeping track of all this is very difficult, or if you're, let's say, 17 years old and keeping track of things isn't your first priority, it becomes very easy to do.
In your, I have to say, first of all, that I'm one of the beneficiaries of your policies with global entry, so I can already see the tangible benefit of it. In your vast experience, looking at these types of methodologies and techniques, if you had to advise any government, what are the three key steps that really make a difference? What is the most popular ones almost that come to mind? Is it text messages? Is it timely reminders? Is it the smaller steps? I mean, what are the three magic formulas we should all be looking at?
So the first is make it automatic. So if there's something which is feasible and appropriate to make automatic, like the settings on your cell phone and maybe your laptop, there's a lot of automatic settings, make things just available unless there's some economic or other reason not to do it. And that will increase participation rates on average by about 27%, and sometimes by a lot higher than that. Second, make it simpler and easier. So in our government, I've been involved in several points in efforts to simplify processes. If you have to file a form, let's say 4 times a year, what about once a year? If you have to file a 7-page form, what about a 1-page form? To have a general effort, it can be small scale within one organization, or it can be in large scale within a full government, to try to simplify things. That's the second. And the third thing is to focus on people's emotional engagement with something that the government or the private sector is requiring. If it makes them feel frustrated, and this is why the co-creation idea is brilliant, if it makes them feel frustrated, if it makes them feel stymied, if it makes them feel unimportant, if it makes them feel that their dignity is negatively affected, then change it probably tomorrow.
Well, we are going to put those 3 points on the bedside table of every single politician in Spain. As you know, there are some countries like Spain that are still reluctant to move towards this methodology. What are the reasons, in your view, why this is happening? Is it simply inertia, or is it that we are not all being clearer in society about the good examples, and there is not enough focus on how things can work so much better by taking some of these simple steps?
I might note that the OECD has a project called the International Sludge Academy, and they're working very hard to have sludge audits all over the world, really, to try to reduce burdens and frictions. And it is the case that behavioral work in Europe and North America has never seen such energy and creativity as we're observing today. In places where the speed is a little slower than elsewhere, I understand this is true in Spain, it might be just unfamiliarity. It might be a thought that if you want change, you should do something big and maybe have a mandate, or a tax. And in the current era where there are economic challenges, mandates and taxes may not be the best approach or the most widely approved approach, but still some people think that's better. What we really need is examples, I think. So the reason that in Australia, for example, and in India, we've seen massive uses of behavioral science is there are fantastic examples where it's actually worked. And that is the best impetus to try to generalize it. I expect Spain within the next decade to be one of the world's leaders in the use of behavioral science. And I would hope that my expectation will be met.
That is great. And how did you think that, because there are different ways to get to convince a government or to start using these kind of methodologies and sciences. What would be your advice? I mean, we have been looking at co-pilots and trying to scale them up. Is it better to start there, or is it better to start with the sludge audits that there seems to be some international traction, as you say, in the OECD towards that? Or is it better really to try to push for a sort of behavioral science institute so that we just do it on a more comprehensive basis? From your experience, what tends to work best when you want to start doing it?
There are different models, and most of them seem to work. So some countries have a very small, some countries have a larger behavioral science unit, which is available and has some expertise that can help with problems. In Argentina, where I visited not long ago, there's keen interest in removing regulatory barriers. So the idea of sludge reduction, of course, was very met with great enthusiasm in current Argentina. In some nations, road safety is a serious issue. And if you can save lives on the road by attending to behavior, that can happen either through a pilot project, what are we going to do about road safety, that has people interested in behavioral science, or it can come from a behavioral unit. I think in terms of the ideas you offered, all of the above is right. And it might be that some are feasible and some not so much. And this tends to be contagious. So sometimes in my country, we've had a great deal of national action and less from, let's say, California, New York, or New Jersey, or Massachusetts, my own state. But then you have a switch where the national government is maybe focusing on immigration, for example, where behavioral science does have a role, but it's only partial. And then you'll see states thinking, what are we going to do about public health? What are we going to do about economic growth? I might say there's a lot of interest in removing barriers to economic growth in, of course, Europe and in the United States, and you can't figure out how to do that without having an understanding of human behavior and what the meaningful barriers are.
And I, we should not have to deal with this, but just to clarify that there are governments right now who are using these methodologies in a successful manner from all different ideologies, that this is not just right versus left, it's pretty much everybody.
Yes, it started in Europe actually as a right of center idea. And the reason was the behavioral tools tend to be more market friendly and less aggressive than some of the tools that the left has liked. In North America, left of center politicians have been very enthusiastic about behavioral strategies, but what was started under President Obama continued under President Trump. So it had a different set of policy goals. Maybe there was one focus on climate change, another focus maybe on resilience against weather-related harm. These are two different ideas, but they overlap. And if you can help people from flooding and extreme heat, that's a good idea, whether you're right of center or left of center.
Well, fancy that. We have found probably the only thing that unites politicians all across the spectrum right now. Cass, just to finish, and I probably should not put you on the spot, but could you be prepared if we manage to convince the government and a group of actors in Spain to push for this idea of applying behavioral science? Could you be prepared to actually come to our country to help push that very first step?
I would be greatly honored, and I would do it probably the week of or the week after the invitation.
Thanks so much. It's such a pleasure always working with you. I have to say that during this whole project of Imagina, you have been the most generous person, with not just with us, but with the Spanish young people who have participated. And it really is uplifting to see that somebody high up there, as you are, from a different country, is always ready to give your free time to give to this push. Thanks so much.
Great honor. And while my Spanish isn't very good, I love visiting Spain. It may be, don't tell my friends in France or Canada, but it's probably the most beautiful country in the world.
Yay. Thank you so much, Cass.